Great. Great. So, Julio Rodriguez, career advisor to Career Center. So, welcome. As this is how to turn your CV into a resume. Um, so, for today's agenda, we will be focusing on these areas, which is assessing yourself. I'm pretty sure you've heard this all the time, like know yourself, know what you want to do, right? So this kind of still plays into a role as even if you're a postdoc, PhD candidate, because at this point, I'm gonna assume that you've had experience either with research, maybe some internships, some jobs, right? So at this point, I'm thinking you have a little bit more to offer a company, an institution, right? So it's all about what have you done, right? And we'll get into more of that as we go along. Another aspect is understanding the overall role of a CV and a resume, right? Understanding the differences, formatting of a CV or a resume. We won't really focus on the CV format as this is more geared towards resumes. How to write effect, how to write effective content, and an overview of sample, how to analyze a position, and formatting and organizing the
Yeah, but
documents.
is it the small computer, right?
Can if yeah. So just make sure you're muted. Sometimes I know things happen, so um just make sure that we can hear each other out. But yeah, so points to ask yourself when you're writing the resume, right? I'm assuming with a CV, if you have one, it might be long. It might be 2, 3 pages. So if your CV is pretty long, I like to say that you've done most of the legwork because now you're really gonna have the ability to pick and choose which of those experiences do you want to really focus on your resume, right? So having all that information on that CV, if you have one, right, can allow you to ask yourself, what specific skills am I trying to highlight for on a resume, right? How can you highlight those qualities for a job? Maybe you've already kind of hinted that in the resume, in the bullet points, right? But how can you expand on that? And a lot of that has to do with um, what's your target? Like, is it a private company? What type of role? Have you analyzed the role? Do your experiences align with the role that they're asking, the qualifications, the job function, right? A lot of the times what happens is that individuals are qualified, but they don't demonstrate that on the resume. And that's because of the keywords. I'm assuming that everybody's heard about ATS systems. If you haven't, I'll kind of go over that a little bit later. But yeah, that plays a factor in how you are visible to recruiters. Um, so that's one thing to consider. How can I explain my experiences in the most concise way possible? Again, reading the job description, understanding it, using AI tools. AI is big. I'm saying right now, one of my sales pitches right now with resumes or CVs is I wouldn't want you to spend 2 hours on a resume, more than 2 hours. Because with AI, knowing how to scan through jobs, it's a little bit easier for you to tailor that resume, right? And like I said, having that CV already kind of cuts that legwork in half already because you already have an idea of where you've been, what you've done, whether it be experiences, publications, research, right? That's gonna cut you a lot of time of having to recall a lot of this stuff. So in this, with this in mind, you would just have to polish that up for that particular position. And the last one, right? How do you want to brand yourself, right? I think that's one thing that we always kind of forget, is we can only market ourselves as effectively as we promote ourselves as well, right? What brand can we create about ourselves with the skills that we've developed, analyzing, researching, collaboration with others, right? What is it that you bring to the table, right? How do you distinguish yourself from others, right? How is Nike different from Adidas, right? How are you different from the person next to you? So think about those things based on all these experiences that you might have had already. Um, so the resume, right? So the CV is more of a document that is geared towards fellow academics, research, more institutions, right? That you might be targeting, right? So it's more of that research base. Like if you were trying to, like, let's just say you want to work at USC in a research lab. Okay, these are your accolades based on publications, anything you've done in that respect. Um, right, it's more flexible because you're able to add more to it. A resume is a one pager. It's kind of like a wallet for guys. Like you can only fit so much, right? So, and you got to be strategic with what you put in there. You can't just add a bunch of stuff. I mean, you can, but nowadays a resume, it's more effective if you're able to convey your qualifications in one page. But with the CV, it is flexible. And then the CV focuses a lot on those aspects of what have you done in academics, what have you done with research, right? Everything comes into play at that regard. Um, I think even for like some government jobs, a CV can work, right? So again, even with a CV, you want to strategize. How do you want to structure it? Because a lot of individuals, what happens is they create the CV or a resume and they structure it one way, and that's how they leave it the whole time. So how there are different ways that you can approach how you structure your documents to present what is more important um, in what you're trying to convey. So let me just make sure. Oh, so the resume, yeah. The resume is a little bit more tricky because the resume is one page, right? It's more geared to private employers. It's geared towards businesses, industries, more of those specific places that are more competitive, that everybody wants a job in. So how do you distinguish yourself, right? So a lot of that is, again, taking into consideration what's your job target? How do you fit into that job based on the experiences that you've already demonstrated in a CV, right? So what I say is in a CV, again, you have your CV, it's full of all of this information. What you can do then is create a new document, copy and paste the most relevant experiences that align with the job, whether it be your work experiences, some internships, some academics, right? What of those positions align with that job? So that means that if you have a 2, 3 page CV, you're gonna have to make some hard choices of like, what do I want to lead my document with, right? So um, again, it's all based on that job description. And essentially it's your ticket. It's your ticket for to land an interview, not to get a job. Again, a lot of people mistake that to get a job, right? So it's an opportunity for you to land an interview. And the interview is where I would rather you spend much more of your time in preparing. So again, I go back to that whole 2 hour thing. I wouldn't want you to spend so much time in the resume as opposed to when you're job searching and preparing for an interview. Because you could be the most qualified person on paper, but completely blow it on the interview if you're not able to articulate or kind of relate yourself to that job, right? So that's how I want you to think about that. And I'm gonna stop there. I don't know. I don't know who's walked in since I have a smaller screen today. But this will be recorded. The slides will be available after the presentation. I'll email them to you. So you haven't really missed much. I'm barely getting into the nitty-gritty of this stuff. So great. Um, let's go to formatting of a resume. So a resume, plain and simple, 1 page length. Bullet points are essential. Structure of them, right? I don't like to see small statements like worked in a team for a presentation. That doesn't tell me anything, right? Anytime I see those, I want you to expand on it. Tell me what was the purpose, what was the result, right? We'll have examples of that in the next slide. Sections, again, sections can vary based on your experiences, what you're targeting. Some people have objectives, some people don't have objectives. Some people ask, are they necessary? It all depends, right? So sections matter. And the better you structure your sections, the better it allows the recruiter or whoever sees your resume to understand what you're trying to convey, right? Um, Sometimes I see individuals put work experience in a section. And then in that work experience, they jam like internships, work they've done, volunteer work, right? And it's like a puddle of just all kinds of things that you're like, is this a work experience or is this a volunteer experience, right? So if you're able to properly section your resume with between professional experiences, volunteer experiences, relevant experiences, it's easier to see what you're trying to say, how you're trying to lead with those important experiences that align with the job again. And you're gonna hear me saying align with the job, because that's the recipe for this. That's how you understand what you're doing with your document, essentially. So sections is an important piece. Font 10 points minimum, because if you do 9, I've seen it where I'm just like, I'm blind. If I take off these glasses, I can't see, and I can barely even see with these glasses. So I'm like reading. So you try to make it as easy as possible for the recruiter, maybe even the ATS system, where it's visible and legible, right? Because what I see too is that sometimes people make the font small to jam even more information. And I'm like, at that point, you're just trying to add like a laundry list, and this is too much. I would rather you focus on the quality rather than quantity. So think about that, right? That you don't have to cheat the paper just to try to fit more information that might not be relevant at all. And then margins half inch or an inch. It just depends on how much space you need, right? Sometimes the standard one I think is an inch, and that means that the margins are kind of like narrow. So if you put them at half an inch, it expands the document. So that gives you some more space to add, more sections or a little bit more detail. So it just depends how you maneuver the document with the formatting. So keep that in mind. Resume content. So here we would go with the sections. So some of the ones that I for sure want to have, I would want you to have is obviously your contact information because how else are they going to contact you, right? So that one's like pretty obvious. Contact information, the objective. So the objective, summary, qualification piece, that's where you write, I am interested in this role, whatever it might be, right? That's an optional piece because a lot of individuals sometimes don't know how to use it properly. They just use it kind of like in a general sense. I'm looking for these opportunities, blah, 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 right? It doesn't really convey what's your intent with that company. So if you're going to use an objective, what I want you to do, again, align with the company. Introduce yourself in that objective summary section and be very clear about why you're applying to this job through that. I'm gonna use somebody's name, Joe Sanchez Mendez. I'm just gonna say, hi, hello, I am currently a doctorate student at USC, interested in a position at Deloitte as a consulting, blah blah blah. I have a previous experience with whatever, right? So right there, you're just highlighting what are you going to bring to the table? It's kind of like your first introduction. So you got to be very intentional in how you use that piece if you're using it. If you feel like you can't introduce yourself adequately or you feel like it's just going to take up space, then don't add one. You don't have to. But if you feel like you could utilize that space, use it. But again, be very intentional as how you use that. Um, the qualification piece, again, is kind of similar to the objective piece. If you feel like you're just adding fluff, don't use it. If you feel like you can use it properly, use it. Education is a must. A lot of the times, that's what they want to see. If you even have qualifications, where you come from, or what's your background, right? Skills, technical skills, depending on where you're at. If you're an engineer or computer science, that section is imperative. Like you need to have that. It could even be your contact. It could be education, and then your skills section. So again, depending on what your background is, sections matter in the order that you label them. So you must have that skills section. Academic projects, if you've had those, you want to add them. And academic projects, I wouldn't want you to treat them like they were just like a project at school. I would want you to use it in the sense of highlight the skills that you used in that academic project, right? How did you collaborate? How did you analyze? How did you research, right? Think about it as if it was like a micro job, right? And sell it. Again, it goes back to creating your own brand. How can you sell what you've done in these projects that aligns with the company's need, the skills, the qualification they're requiring, right? So, how can you give that project that essence that you are ready to transfer those skills into the real world or an academic setting, whatever, right? Your work experience, again, how can you distinguish that from an academic uh, project, right? You want to add the actual relevant pieces there that matter as what difference, how do you differentiate academic and work experiences and your experience, right? So think about it like that. If you've done volunteer work, you can add those, but again, it's optional. If you feel like your document is ready and you don't need to add that volunteer piece, then you don't have to, right? Is this necessary in my document, right? Just ask yourself that question with any of the, just ask yourself these questions like, is this section necessary in my document? Can I live without it? And will I be fine, right? If you're like, yes, then you don't have to put it, right? Um, yeah, it's the same thing with all these additional sections. So how do you write effective content? Again, a lot of this is similar to action verbs, transitions phase, and results. So when you're writing bullet points, a lot of that has to be led off with an action verb. I'm pretty sure everybody knows that you're not supposed to say use I's, talk in the first person, right? You're conveying what you've done. What is the action that you've done in this particular experience? Analyzing, researching, collaboration, producing, spearheading, any of those words, right? You could do a Google search, how many action verbs there are, and you can see a list of those, and you can use those, right? And then again, we get into that second piece. What was the purpose of that action, right? Why did you do that? Why did you analyze? Why did you research? And how does that align with the job description you're looking at, right? And at the end, what was the result of that? What did your analysis convey? What did it illustrate? What did your research find? Was there any new revenue if you were doing marketing or something, right? So this is kind of like that structure, kind of like that early, it's kind of like a simplified STAR method in interviewing, right? So action verb, analyzing for what, and what did you find at the end of that, right? Keeping in mind, how does that align with that job that you're looking into, right? If it's a transferable skill, that's a little bit more flexible. And a transferable skill could be like collaborating in a team of 10 people where I led the project, resulting in a timely delivery of a presentation, something like that, right? So it just depends on how you want to convey certain skills in those bullet points. So here's an example, not so good bullet point. Worked in a team to lead a revenue loss class project. Okay, typically I see these quite often or on a day-to-day basis. And so when I'm asking individuals, okay, you worked in a team to lead a revenue loss project, but why? What was the purpose of that? Was it to analyze a company? Like, tell me more, like, because this is not telling me nothing, right? So if you find yourself having even maybe you have like a long sentence, but maybe it's vague, right? Ask yourself that. Is this sentence vague? Can I even understand what I did, right? So if you feel like you've left something out, you need to maybe follow this formula, right? What was the purpose and what was the result, right? I don't know why I put excellent. This is probably, I should have just put good enough, right? So this is more of a constructed approach. Collaborated in a 6-member team to identify revenue loss for a Fortune 500 company. That was the purpose, right? So the action here was collaboration in a team to find revenue loss for a company. By analyzing large sets of customer data leading to a launch of new product forecasting 3 million revenue and increase in first year, right? That tells me more of what the purpose of that project, whatever you might have done in that particular position, whether it be a job, internship, fellowship, volunteer, even your volunteer experiences. I don't want to see it just volunteer to promote whatever, right? Treat each one as how can you use that to highlight your skills, right? And use this formula to help you kind of brainstorm how you can effectively write bullet points to align to a particular role or company. And so the difference here was resume bullet points are tailored to the job, quantitative in nature, and results oriented. But you might be like, well, what if I don't have any numbers, right? Again, that I wouldn't want you to fabricate numbers. If you don't have numbers, if you don't have percentages, that's fine, right? But at least tell me what was some of the results, right? Because I know I get students that ask that, like, well, I worked at this company and I didn't have access to the numbers, right? So again, you don't have to make it up, right? Just kind of tell me what is it that you found, what was the result that you feel happened, right? Were you able to meet a timely deadline? Were you able to complete a project? Did you create new methods of researching? I don't know, whatever it might be, right? So again, numbers are important, but you don't want to make them up either. And then so another thing to do, right, is making a list. So how can you brainstorm in terms of what have I done in this position or these experiences, right? So this is a list that you can kind of keep in mind, right? Like what were your job duties? How did you do it, right? Did you get any rewards, any accolades based off that, right? Did you solve a problem? Did you save money to the company? Did you find any research? Did you use any particular software, right? A lot of the times, what I see in people's resumes is that they don't explain in the skills section, sometimes they'll write Python, C++, Nova, so I don't know, research methods, right? But they don't add context of how did they use those particular tools in their bullet points, right? So if you use Java or C++, how did you use that? In what context, right? Did you use it to code, to clean up data, right? Tell me more of that. And that goes back to that formula piece, right? What was the purpose of using that particular method or that tool, right? Um, so again, it goes back to a little bit of reflection of how have you done these projects, these jobs, whatever it might be. Again, finding numbers, quantifying what was the benefit, what was your contribution to that. Um, so again, don't fabricate numbers. Just try to tell how you hone that skill and how have you used it in the past. Here's an example. This one's gonna be like a quick 3 slides, but when you're analyzing a job, right? And I'm gonna show you how we can use a tool used called VMOC to help you kind of streamline this. But I still want you to understand when you're reading a job description to kind of start seeing what are some potential keywords that could be useful in a resume, right? If you already have your CV full of information and all that stuff that you've done, right? All you really have to do then is just tailor your current CV to some of these keywords. So for example, with this data analytics graduate program, right? This one, you know, we've highlighted some of these jobs, some of these keywords like learning, people driven by purpose, helping people, culture, diversity, support, discover strategic priorities, right? Everything in yellow could be a keyword that could be recognized by an ATS system um, that can help you be visible to a recruiter. And this is important because a lot of the times, a lot of the companies now get a lot of applications from, undergraduates, masters, PhDs, right? So they've used ATS to streamline this in order to, um, find the best candidates. And again, if you don't use ATS, if you don't use the keyword, you might be qualified, but you might be not showcasing yourself, making yourself visible to these employers, right? Because now they're using technology to try to find the best talent. Um, so learning how to read a job description could be essential for your creating of a resume, right? How to market yourself. Here, let's go to the next slide, what you'll do. And then so typically in the qualification piece, the job requirements, you definitely want to pay attention to this, right? What you'll be doing, like this one will be saying working closely with management to execute analytical initiatives. Analytical initiatives could be a big word, something that you could be doing, right? Analytics comes up again, machine learning, right? Those are things that you want to add in your resume. Developing, collaboration, proposing, designing. These are active verbs, right? These are verbs that you can use in your bullet points when you're trying to convey that qualification, that skill that you have already. And then, yeah, preferred qualification. Typically in the preferred qualifications, this is where you will see what they actually want. So if you have these, you definitely want to have them on your resume. You definitely want to highlight that in either in the skills section or in your bullet points as to how you've done these particular skills, right? Um, so now we go to VMOC. Have y'all used VMOC in the chat? If you can put it, if you're familiar, if you've used it, um, what's been your experience using it? So let's see. No, okay. I'm not familiar, never used it, never used it. Cool. Okay. Great. I'm glad nobody's used it because this is gonna let me kind of teach y'all something. So it's like a first time, right? And I like VMOC because, like I said, I wouldn't want you to spend too much time on your resume breaking your head on this. Um, and this is gonna save you a lot of time. And I can probably show you too how to use ChatGPT, but I like VMOC and I want you to use VMOC because it's a little bit easier to interact with. So VMOC is AI driven. It provides feedback on your resume if you create one. And then as well, it allows you to kind of simulate an ATS system like um, of how to analyze a document, right? So we went through this piece, right? Let me go back. So we went through this piece, right? This can take time reading it on like a manual level, right? Okay, how do I pick out the words? I think this one's cool. I think this one might work, right? That's gonna take time if you have multiple job applications on your plate. So I'm gonna go to VMOC. Um, is it available? Yeah, it should be. Well, for PhDs and masters. I should be available for PhDs. I don't know why it wouldn't be. Um, but in the event it's not, at least I can show you what I'm talking about in terms of how you can structure your document and how you can, and if, and I'll show you how you can use ChatGPT as well for this. Um, so so going on to VMOC, let's see. Okay, so go in here. So log in. So can everybody see the VMOC, the dashboard here? Cool. Okay. So this would be VMOC. And here again, so if you do have access to it, and I'll get information on this. Essentially this is what it does. It gives you feedback in terms of how your resume is looking. It breaks it down based on these three benchmarks: impact, presentation, and competencies. So here you would have to upload it as a PDF. And when you upload it, it'll give you detailed feedback, kind of like on a step-by-step basis. So for example, this one, again, we're talking about those short bullet points, right? That don't have a lot of context. So it can pick up on that, right? It'll give you that feedback saying you have not used action-oriented language in this bullet. Try to reword your bullet to start with a strong action verb. Once you do that, then it'll move on to the next thing. You need to add competencies, skills, right? So it is a very intuitive tool to help you kind of structure that resume accordingly. It goes into specifics of your resume. Whoops, let me take that off. Whoop, Move this. So it goes into specifics of maybe you need to add keywords, quantifiable things to incorporate any detail in an actual specific. Yeah, so I'll get to that in a little bit, into the specifics. So I'm just kind of going over this. Right. So it's just kind of building that resume to be more precise. So it goes off the presentation, competencies. Once you go through all these suggestions, you're like, okay, cool. My resume might be at an 80%, 80, right? You'd be like, I'm feeling good. And I see that a lot. They get students get an 80 and they're like, I feel like I could apply to all the jobs, right? And I'm like, no, you can't, because the job market is different. Each job is, you got to tailor it, right? So let's say you're at an 80% score, right? So to that question that was just asked, again, we would have to find the job we're looking into, right? What we're interested in. We want to read the job description, all that stuff. What we can do then is copy that essential, information. And in here, in this little box known as called the upload job description, you can add that job description. So I'm gonna add my example that I already have in there just to save us some time. So this is targeting an analytics intern position. Um, so here's like the description about the job, the duties, what they offer, some simple information, right? VMock then will analyze that information, and then you choose the resume that you're going to apply with, which should be your own, right? And this is my resume. So my resume is geared into education. So I'm not going to be a match, but it's just the purpose of the example, right? So once you do that, you optimize the resume, and this will give you a summary of how much of a match you are to that particular role. So as you can see here, I'm a 52% match. So again, this goes back to what we talked about in terms of the keywords, structuring, creating those bullet points more efficiently, right? Because as you can see here, I'm missing all these keywords in my resume. Here it tells you the count in the job description and how many are in my resume. And this is greatly affecting my visibility for this job. So I wouldn't be able to be seen by a recruiter essentially, because if a recruiter has about 100 applications and they're like, don't want to go through all these applications. I just want to see who the top 10. They go into their ATS software. They might say, give me the top 10 candidates for this position. And if you're at a 52%, you're basically in the 50th percentile or whatever, right? So again, you're probably not gonna be seen. They could comb through the resumes, but in today's world, do you really think that they're gonna go through 100 applications just to try to pick out somebody else, right? So again, these are just strategies that help you, um, make yourself more visible to recruiters. Um, right? We still want to add like networking and all this other stuff beyond that. But if you're solely relying on application portals, this is what you want to consider, right? Because this is kind of like the traditional way of applying. And a lot of people just, they create one general state resume and they just send it everywhere. And that's not gonna work. A lot of students say, I've applied to 100 jobs. And I get it. You apply to 100 jobs thinking something's gonna come back. And in today's world, it doesn't really work like that anymore. So this is really gonna help you understand how to analyze these jobs, right? And how the ATS system essentially works and the back end when you're applying for positions and stuff like that. So again, when you're converting your CV to a resume, again, see what aligns with the job description. I know that you might have publications, you might have research, you might have articles. Again, if you do have those, like, and you want to incorporate them in your resume, I don't know how everybody here has them labeled. And sometimes I see people just have the publication on their CV, like, just I forgot what it's called. I haven't been in school in a while. But if you want to promote those, add like a bullet point. What was that publication about? What did you do? Was it a research publication? What was the context of that, right? Give me an idea of what it is. Because if you're just putting a publication on a resume with no context, that goes back to the just telling me and not showing me, right? I have no context of what that publication means, and I'm not gonna go and look it up because again, I have 100 other applications to go through. I, I'm not gonna be a jerk, but I'm not gonna treat you like you're something special, right? Just go look for your publications. So again, if you feel like within that research publication you develop skills, why not showcase them in a bullet point, right? Be very concise of how you use that. So you want to use your one page to your advantage since you might have more to offer than somebody just graduating with an undergrad degree or a master's degree, right? Um, Again, this is going to help you again streamline how to analyze a job. So you're not spending hours and hours tailoring that resume to different opportunities, right? Um, and the same can be done with ChatGPT. So let me just go to ChatGPT real quick. And ChatGPT varies a little bit just because it's not as nice. It doesn't give you a report. It just spits out the um the information you asked for it, right? So it doesn't give you a percentage. You can ask it to tailor it as much, but I still wouldn't want you to use ChatGPT to completely format your resume. So all you gotta do is, prompt it. So can you provide me with the functional keywords for this role, right? And you paste it. And it'll give you keywords in bold that might align with that job, right? Eight is not enough, so you can always ask more, and it'll give you a couple more, right? And you can say more until you feel like you've had a good enough idea of what keywords to add. And chat has done a new thing where it's added descriptions of how does this particular skill, how can you use that in a bullet point, right? So analytics, project coordinator. So these would be the words that you would want to incorporate for that job description. So these are different ways in the event that you guys don't have access to VMOC, because I don't think I've heard that PhDs don't have it, but if in the event they do, I'm sorry about that. But at least this is another way that you can essentially save time when you're creating that document. Um, so you're not like just doing it off, you're like wondering like, okay, I see the job description, but I'm still confused in terms of what keywords are necessary, right? So this could be one way for you to save time and focus more on the interview process in the event that you have, a callback for an interview. Um, but yeah, and then after that, I think my key takeaways for this is the presentation is back, right? I was able to go away from the ChatGPT. Okay. So again, right, tailor specific to audience and the job description. Avoid dense academic skills and experience not relevant to the job. Again, just fluffing it up because you feel like more is better. More is not better, right? And I always say this wrong, so let me make sure I say it right. It's quality over quantity. Yeah, quality over quantity, right? So make sure you're adding your best, experiences on there that are relevant to the job. Right? Use the top 1/3 of your document to catch the reader's attention. Again, if you want to use a summary section, use it to your advantage, but be very mindful of how you use that. So think about your summary section, and this is the analogy I use. Think about it as like when you're on Netflix or whatever video streaming platform you're on. When you read a title, you already know you're gonna make that decision whether you want to watch it or not based on those words, right? Whatever the title of that movie show is, you're like, oh, that sounds interesting. I want to watch it. You're like, oh no, that sounds kind of lame. I don't want to watch it. Think about it like that with your resume. How do you want to promote yourself toward that job based on those skills, interests, right? Use that summary to your advantage. That's essentially your first handshake on paper. Action verbs are key, specific to your language. Everything on your resume, on your CV and resume is fair game. That means that, if you do put something on your resume, but then it turns out to not to be true and you can't elaborate on that on an interview, you're gonna set yourself up to kind of look kind of like you're misleading them, right? So just make sure whatever you add on there is factual and you can speak to it. And then again, just follow some of the formatting, right? Keep it clean. Don't make it so small on the font. Be easy on the eyes. Structure your document on sections. If you have questions on that, you can come to our drop-in hours Monday through Friday, or you could visit your college. They should have a career center and help you with those resume to help you construct a more concise document in the event that you're like, I still don't know what I should add on my resume because I have all these experiences that I want to highlight, right? So we can help you kind of process of elimination in regards to what you want to convey and how you want to demonstrate your skills. And definitely avoid typos. That's gonna already show like if you're paying attention to detail. If you have a typo, it's like, what is this, right? So make sure that you have clean sentences, you don't have misspellings, weird words, right? I don't think I've ever seen somebody put U, like just the letter U anymore. I think I saw it once a long time ago, and I was like, what's this, right? So just make sure you spell all the words. Yeah, so that's pretty much it in terms of how to transfer your resume, your CV into a resume, right? Um, this is just going forward, just some key fall key semester dates for some of our events. If you're an international student, we have career resources for international students happening tomorrow. We have the career fair happening next week. So if you want to have your resume ready for that, visit some of the employers that are going to be on campus. We have a virtual international student career fair. This one's a little bit funky on the time because we try to connect with employers across the globe, right? So if you're an international student that's somewhere else, just be mindful of the times. And then we do have the Beyond the PhD conference. I don't know if any of y'all have been there. You're welcome to attend it as well. Um, we're trying to have, people within the academic field, even those that are in the real world, come and talk about what it is to have a PhD, what can you do with a PhD, right? So it's a good experience to be there. I'll be there hosting some career chats in terms of like resume, interviewing, networking, things of that nature. Maybe if you're there, bring your resume. You could be like, "Hey, I was at your boring workshop. Does it look good now, right?" So we can definitely go over that, right? So hopefully I see some of y'all there. And then if you're interested in more of the events that we have lined up, this is the QR code. We'll have a couple more. I just didn't want to blast it all on the previous slide. And then yeah, then if you're on social media, follow us on there. We just post events, updates, stuff like that that might be important for USC students. And yeah, and then if you want to visit us, these are our drop-in hours, our location. So that's pretty much it on my end. I hope that wasn't too much. So I would open it up on the chat box if you want to ask questions, or you could just unmute yourself and I can try to assist you as best as possible. Yeah, you're
Uh,
welcome.
I had a Hi, I had a question about I actually wrote it in the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
So I was asking like, is it okay to like everyone says, and you also mentioned quite a lot that using keywords is very important, but is it okay to like literally copy sentences from job description into your resume if it fits, of course, but is that okay to copy the sentence or should we like change a little?
So you're talking about copying the sentence from the job description and put it into your resume?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So another thing that was happening, and this is where again it goes back to the best policy is that some people were copying the whole job description, they would paste it on a Word doc, and then they would put the letters in white. So it would be on the back end, right? And so that's how they were tricking the ATS system. But the thing is
Oh,
that,
wow.
yeah, you can trick it, right? But are you going to be able, once the interview comes and they ask you these questions, are you going to be able to answer them effectively, right? So again,
Right,
so
right.
try to avoid copying directly. You can, if you want to, you can copy it, but paraphrase it. Again, you want to make sure that you're conveying how
Yes.
your how your skill set aligns with that. So you could use that section to kind of help you brainstorm, but don't copy it word for word because again, then it'll just seem like you just copied and pasted, and then you'll be able to detect that. Okay,
Yes. Cool.
did
Thank
that
you.
help? Okay.
Yes,
Um.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Actually had another question. I'll just go ahead because I'm already in this. Um, what's the best type of file uh, uh, we should submit for the application process? Like, is it a PDF or a doc file? Like, which is better for if I also consider that, oh, the application people, employers will be using ATS, then is it good to use a doc file or PDF?
PDF because Word docs sometimes are funny, the formatting or depending on the software. Sometimes I've seen it where it doesn't format correctly. In the PDF, it stays the same. So I would say PDF. Great. So I think
Cool.
Edith
Yeah.
was
Thanks.
next, and then Aurelian, and then David.
Yeah, that's me. Hi, thank you very
Oh,
much for the present.
sorry, let me go with Edith, you, and then David. Okay? Okay, okay. Edith.
Hi, thank you so much. This was really helpful. So I had a question. I'm in a literature PhD program. And so I had kind of a twofold question. The first is, for those of us who are in the humanities and may not have as kind of quantitative outcomes for our work, I'm thinking like I teach Spanish. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice for how to demonstrate clear outcomes when we don't have kind of more quantitative results for things. So that's part one of my question. And then the other is I'm thinking about, like, again, folks in PhDs in the humanities, and I know there are a couple of us here. Where we may have certain kind of soft skills in terms of like strong critical thinking skills or things like that that may not necessarily be reflected in the job titles that we have, but are skills that you naturally need to develop in a PhD program in order to succeed. And so I'm wondering if you have suggestions for PhD students for kind of how to demonstrate the sort of natural skills you develop as a PhD student when applying to jobs for which you may be a strong fit, but may not have previous experience, say, directly in that field or work experience. That may like align if an AI is reading your resume, but you may actually be well prepared for it because of the sort of natural skills you develop as a PhD student. So yeah, just I guess just maybe general advice for PhDs for sort of like those more less, or I guess like less tangible skills that we develop and how to present those in an industry setting.
Yeah, so again, how I said, I know that sometimes numbers aren't always available to you based whatever the situation might be, right? Or the type of job you do. So you don't want to fabricate it, right? So again, the idea with, talking about soft skills, like what was the skill? Let's just say the skill, what was the skill about, right? Why did you perform that skill? For what was the reason, right? So it's more of telling me like a reason why you use that skill, how did you develop it, and what was the purpose of it, right? So I think you mentioned you were a teacher for Spanish.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe for those, you can talk about develop the curriculum that facilitated the learning outcomes of 15 elementary kid students, right? Something like that can let me know that you were able to develop curriculum, right? That you were able to implement class structures, right? So again, as a teacher, like what have you done, right, that you can talk about? So whether it be developing curriculum, whether it be what does a teacher do? Create new ones, right? Implementing, working across campus, whatever it might be, right? So a lot of those things is just give them purpose. If if you don't have numbers, you don't necessarily have to force it, right? But you can highlight maybe the scale of who you taught, right? what was the, did you see any um, test score increases by any chance that you could go off of, perhaps any progressions? If you maybe saw, how did you help students that struggled, right? If there was any regression, what methods do you use to help facilitate learning, right? So again, you kind of want to take that step back and be like, okay, how have I done this in teaching? How can I convey that as a skill, right? Whether it be whatever it might be in your case, right? So, um, like for myself, I don't have any quantitative numbers in my resume either. It was just like, face to face, meeting with students, helping them, assisting them with finding jobs. So a lot of that is just what was the outcome and the purpose of those skills that you've used. If that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Mhm. I think Aurelien, is that how you say it?
Yeah, that's me. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. That's very helpful. I just have a very quick question, actually. On one of your slides called resume content, you're mentioning that we can add, and it's optional, of course, qualifications to the resume. Yeah, perfect. That slide. Thank you very much. So we see qualifications, and I'm just not exactly sure what is the difference between qualifications and skills or technical skills. So can you please just review that again? I appreciate
Yes.
it.
So skills and technical skills. So in this piece, I don't want to see, so again, maybe going back to Edith's question, it kind of maybe relates, is like, let's say in the skills section, I wouldn't want you to put leadership or
Mm,
dependable, right? I wouldn't want you to put a soft skill in that section, because I would rather you tell me how have you performed that particular skill, right? So right in that section, it's all about technical skills, such as what technology you're familiar with, what languages you might be able to speak, right? So people that are in like humanity that you talked about, typically what we focus on is knowing how to use PowerPoint, Excel, Zoom, Canva. So some of those techie things, right, that we're kind of good at. And then languages, if you know Spanish, if you know Armenian, whatever it might be, right? Those are skills, hard skills. In
okay.
the qualification piece, that's more of like, that's kind of tied with like the summary of like at the top, like what are your qualifications for this job? Again, that goes back to highlighting yourself in words. Like, how do you want to demonstrate why you're interested in this job? So
Mm,
in that one, you're able to speak a little bit more of why you're interested in that particular role. So the skill section is more black and white, this one.
okay, got it. Okay, got it. Thank you very much. That's
Yeah.
helpful. Thank you.
David?
Yes, hello. I had a little bit more of a general question that I thought might apply here. So I'm a PhD in electrical engineering, and at least in engineering, the vast majority, the statistic goes that the vast majority of hiring decisions happen when you apply for a job in the fall, and then you begin that job like the following fall once you finish that year. Because the recruitment cycle is generally a year ahead. How does that? But the problem is that as a PhD student, frequently you don't actually know whether or not you're going to be graduating or leaving in the. You know that you should be done around this semester, but you won't know whether to be done that semester, 6 months later, etc. How do you balance that when making applications where you're applying the jobs, but you can't give a hard deadline when you become available?
Okay. So I mean, a lot of some of those jobs might be, I don't know if in the descriptions they say what they're looking for. So sometimes they'll say looking for graduates that will graduate after a certain date. Like sometimes they'll say, like for example, earlier I had one, I was looking at a job opportunity for a student that said the qualifications were based on them being able to graduate after December 2025. So that means next year. So being able to find some of these opportunities that are, and that's the thing that sucks, that sometimes jobs don't tell you what they're looking for and what's a time frame, right? So that's something that you could essentially, if you're interested in a job, you could reach out to the recruiter, right? If you're able to find that and ask them, hi, my name is David, I'm interested in this position. However, I'm currently in this PhD program. I was curious if you could provide me with any information in terms of what are you looking for? Is there any flexibility? Are you looking to hire within a certain time frame, right? So a lot of that is kind of you trying to reach out to them, wherever you see the opportunity, whether it be on LinkedIn, Handshake, or whatever job source. If you're able to find that point of contact, you should try to reach out to them. LinkedIn sometimes is friendly enough to put the person that's hiring or the recruiter for that. So if you see that as an option, I would say, and that if that's your question, reach out to them, because that'll let you know if you should spend time applying for this or not. So that's kind of one way you can go, because kind of like the question you're asked, it's kind of hard to say yes, when to apply and when to not to, because we're not the ones hiring, it's them, right? So um, in the event you're able to see that, do it. And if let's say you're interested in a particular company and you know they're going to be here for a career fair or some sort of event, I would say try to contact the person that's going to be here as a representative and say, are you the recruiting person for this job, or is there anybody you can contact me with so I can ask this particular question? So that's one way you can go, because each company is different in terms of how they hire. But I guess to wrap up your question, sometimes they're flexible. It just depends. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, when do you graduate? Oh, okay. So you're graduating in summer. Okay. Do you think you could start by August? Cool. It just depends. I've seen cases like this.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. And then I'm currently in a doctoral. Cindy says, I'm currently in a doctoral program and I'm running training back to the workforce. How to highlight past experiences, military, volunteer, when those experiences are over 8 to 10 years old. I'm currently in a doctoral program. Okay. Was there a break? Was there like a gap in employment or anything like that?
Yes, I was in the military and I'm finishing my doctoral. I'm hoping I'll be done next year in the spring. So I'm getting back into the workforce. I've had lots of volunteer opportunities and really like part-time side jobs, not involved at all with what I'm trained to do in my educational background. And so I'm finally getting back into the workforce. So I'm not sure how to translate those skills and work experiences when I'm getting back in.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Being a mom for last 10-ish years.
yeah, so I think for this one again, it goes back to perhaps you know, taking a step back and seeing what did you do in the military, like what type of jobs. I mean, whatever your position was, right? I think in the military, a lot of it is I'm thinking leadership, right? So how did you do that? So leadership is one of those transferable skills that Edith was kind of asking about too, right? Like how do you convey that, right, without numbers? So again, this is something that perhaps we can meet over an appointment to help you kind of brainstorm, because just right here, it's kind of like, trying to sum up your life in like 10 minutes, right? So a lot of that is though, what have you done in the military? What did you do?
It's even just trying to get back into which field, obviously, as well. So as my getting into my doctoral program has really inspired me to go back into the workforce and really try to contribute out there. And so it's just trying to, what jobs am I really trying to look for? Something that fits well, that I'm interested in, and also that I will do well. So it's, as I'm doing the resume, I can build that, but how do I, as you were suggesting, it's a little bit different. So I'll definitely meet up for
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of that too would be, I think what would make it easier for you too is having a target. Like, what are you interested in? What are you seeing yourself? Do you want to do research? Do you want to go into a particular role, right? So you might want to, you know, take the first step, career exploration, right? Like, what is interesting to you right now? What within your program, what are you going towards? And that can help you then start narrowing in, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what they're looking for. I might not have this yet. How can I develop that through either academic coursework, projects, research, or looking for an internship? When are you graduating?
May 25.
Okay, so you have time, right? So again, the sooner the better you try to look for some of these opportunities, right? And that's gonna help you start creating that document. Because right now you could create a general one. I'm not saying not to create a general one, if that's what it sounds like on my end today. You could create a general one where you can just highlight the skills you have. Like, something, what have you done in the military? What have you done as a volunteer? Again, going back to the volunteer one, you want to treat it as like what skills did you do as a volunteer, right? What did you give to them? What did you get out of it? What did you learn? So sometimes volunteer opportunities, you might not be getting paid for them, but you're observing, you're seeing how things are working in a particular situation, and you can contribute to that, right? And that's kind of like a trade-off with volunteering. You're seeing those skills develop, you can develop them yourself, but how have you done it and where have you done it? That's what's important. So I wouldn't necessarily try to like, it's kind of like they say you gotta crawl before you walk, right? You gotta still try to find your where you're trying to go to, and then look at your resume and say, okay, this is how I'm gonna structure it, and this is what I need. How am I gonna address those holes in the meantime? So that's what I would suggest at the moment.
Thank you. That's quite helpful. Thanks.
Okay. So Joel said, could you please provide some examples of good versus bad resumes yeah, I could send some bad and good examples when I email this to y'all after the presentation. So I'll do that for you. And then Edith, sorry, one other question that occurred to me from Cindy's great question. In appointments, can someone in the Career Center help us think about possible career paths that maybe aren't on our radars that could be a good fit based upon our experiences and interests? Yeah, definitely. We can, see your resume. We can go over it, give you tips about what you'll be a good fit at, what will you be a good fit for. But again, we could say you're good at this, you might be good at that. But again, the ultimate question would be, do you want to do it? And is it something that it's on your radar, right? So again, right, we can give you that option of like, yeah, this is what you could do, this is what you should do. At the end of the day, you're the one that's going to make the decision if that's something that you're interested in, right? So, yeah, but you could pay us a visit and we can try to help you with that as much as possible. Shivali, does USC students have discounted access to recruiting consulting companies or personnel? We don't have that, but we do have a resource called Management Consulted. I don't know, have you heard about it?
No.
So Management Consulted, I'm not sure if PhD students have access to it. So Management Consulted, let's go to, if you are interested in it, I'm just going to, give me a second. I'm just gonna go to the website. So if you put in Management Consulted and you Google it or whatever you do, it'll be the first one. I'm not sure if you guys have access to this, but this is the web page, and you can actually pay for it if needed. But you might want to check as a student. This, if you do have it, this can give you some information or resources in terms of consulting, how to prepare for cases, how to edit your resumes, consulting skills to think of, and events. So this is something that you can explore on your own. But in terms of what you asked specifically, I'm not quite sure we have that. And I don't know if you're part of Marshall. If you were, that would be something you could ask them directly, since they're a little bit more private about their resources and stuff like that.
Thank you.
But great. So yeah, so I mean, I hope that this was helpful, that I answered some of your questions. I hope I didn't scare y'all with the process of all this. But with that being said, if there's nothing else, I hope y'all have a great weekend. And I'll send this to you on an email. And feel free to reach out if you have any additional follow-up questions. I'll try to answer them as best as I can. But yeah, thank you for being here, and I hope to see you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Have a good
Yeah,
weekend.
you too. Bye-bye.